You are listening to the 2 and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
Joe Cap can rest easy. He should be able to get some decent sleep, knowing that he's safe for now until he meets Mosca.
Grab some poutine and a double-double. It's time for the 2 and Out CFL podcast.
Now they have to kick it out, and they do!
Every week, Travis Currah.
Does anybody still care about this podcast?
And Brazilian Ty.
Hunters are people, too.
Talk fantasy football, bring you the latest in CFL news, and sprinkle in a little bit of nonsense.
Are you kidding? This is unbelievable!
Ready, set, hunt!
And we are a part of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. I'm Travis Currah. Brazilian Ty is here, and starting the show this week, today, a little bit of a somber note, as the CFL has lost one of its greatest characters of all time. King Kong Angelo Mosca has passed away at 84 years old after battling Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed in 2015. And Mosca is Hamilton. Hamilton is Mosca. Like, this guy, he's like one of those, almost like a comic book superhero when it comes to the Canadian Football League. I got into his book in the last 10 years or so. Say It to My Face, it was called. And I read it again recently because Oz Davis of the Rouge, White, and Blue CFL podcast had a side project, Truly the Goats, and did a special episode on Angelo. And revisiting his life and his career, this guy is going to live forever in Hamilton and in CFL history. Just an absolute legend, Ty.
Yeah, that's fair, and probably holds one of the greatest moments of Grey Cup lore.
Right. After his playing days.
Joe Cap can rest easy. He should be able to get some decent sleep, knowing that he's safe for now until he meets Mosca when he finally passes. But no, it's just it's a loss. But at the same time, you look at what he has dealt with the last couple of years, and it's almost a sense of relief.
Yeah. At
the same time, but it is a loss for the CFL family and the league as a whole. Like you said, he's basically a superhero in Hamilton, right? With his playing days and what he did off the field and everything. So I think that loss will be felt. And I wonder too if the players maybe use it as a rallying point a little bit for the rest of the year.
I kind of think so. I recently was even watching some of his matches on the WWE network, right? Mm-hmm. Towards the end of his wrestling career, he did some matches in New York, and he was wrestling like in the football offseason. This guy was awesome, and I think he's got a CFL record, Ty, that I don't know will ever be matched. He played 15 seasons, 9 Grey Cup appearances.
That's insane.
I don't know if that'll ever be touched.
No. Not that percentage.
Yeah. That's absolutely wild. Rest in peace, Angelo Mosca.
Join 2 and Out for CFL Fantasy and CFL Pick'em and show Currah and Ty what you got.
They are who we thought they were.
Just click cflfantasy.tsn.ca.
Enough from talking about it. There has to be consequences.
And pick'em.cfl.ca.
This episode of 2 and Out is brought to you by the Alberta Association of Optometrists, proudly celebrating a century of caring for Albertans. It happens. 1 in 4 school-aged kids have vision problems, yet 80% of learning is visual for a child, so that's why booking family eye exams with an optometrist helps ensure learning success. You can't detect hidden eye problems, but your optometrist can. So Alberta health coverage towards annual eye exams is available until your child's 19th birthday. Book your family's eye exam today at optometrists.ab.ca. The Alberta Association of Optometrists represents almost 800 doctors of optometry in over 80 communities across Alberta. Members are highly trained, regulated health professionals who provide primary eye health and vision care to Albertans. Learn more at optometrists.ab.ca. Let's start talking about Week 14 here. And the first game of the week was the Ticats beating the Lions 26-18. And this first quarter, Ty, was basically taken up by the first two drives of the game. Both teams were controlling the ball. They were moving it down the field, and it looked like it was going to be close right down to the wire. And it was it definitely looked like a different BC Lions team than we had seen the last few weeks. Michael Riley he looked like he was on. He didn't always have the support of his supporting cast, but he definitely wanted to win, and he wanted to try to keep the BC's playoff hopes alive here.
Yeah, and you know, I don't want to say it's must win, or that it was coming in. I don't think it was. But, you know, a loss basically ends their season, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, we talked about it with Ottawa and Edmonton, you know, playing for pride, and, you know, how that they're basically playing for jobs next season. Well, BC's kind of in that mode, but they're kind of in that mushy middle where, you know, they're kind of playing for jobs next year, but at the same time they still have that outside chance. So it's kind of weird, but you know, Michael Riley comes out and looks almost like they needed Mike Riley last night to show up. Didn't quite get it, but right. It was one of the better games BC's played.
Yeah, that first field goal drive the BC had, 13 plays, 74 yards, 7 minutes and 40 seconds. To start a game on the road like that, it's a good start. Obviously, you wanted the touchdown, and if it does become the touchdown, I don't think there's a better way you could start a game on the road. And then Hamilton comes back, and they had a 12-play drive that took 6 minutes off the clock. So there's almost the entire first quarter there. But after the game, Michael Riley was very frustrated. I guess that there was all sorts of headset issues. Yeah. And towards the end of the game, you could definitely see it. But at many points during the game, they couldn't communicate with him and his headset. He was very upset after the game, and rightfully so. When you got to interview after a tough loss like that and things aren't working the way they should, I'd be pretty upset as well. But man, sometimes you got to wonder if the premier quarterbacks in the league should be given a little bit more power to make their own plays and their own calls on the field when stuff like this is going down.
Especially when it's somebody like Michael Riley who's seen basically everything this league can throw at him. You know, something did seem off. And then when was the last time you saw Michael Riley take a time count?
Right.
And then I knew something had to be up. We find out after the game what it was. But yeah, in that situation, the OC has to know by that point. Like, I mean, it would have been early on in the game that they figured out, okay, the communication is not, you know, it's not, we can't count on it. How do you not let him start calling the game? You can trust Michael Riley to do that. Or give him a set of plays before he gets out there or something, right? Because you can do that on the bench.
Yeah.
And, you know, they didn't make the adjustment. And we talk about teams having to make adjustments throughout games all the time, and they didn't make the adjustment they needed to with the communication problems they had, and it cost them.
By the end of the first half, the Ticats had a 15-3 lead, and I think really the dagger was right at the end of the first half. The Ticats had a 98-yard, 6-play drive. Just beautiful passes from Jeremiah Mazzoli right where it needed to be for Stephen Dunbar. It was, I think, a 47-yard gain. And then that touchdown to Brandon Banks, his first, which it feels weird to say, his first touchdown of the 2021 season. Brandon Banks finally gets it at the end of the first half in this one. And they're definitely getting him more involved now. He's looking more like himself. He had 6 catches, 75 yards, and the touchdown in this one.
And that's what we've been saying, is that he hasn't looked like himself. And I don't know if it was, the fact there was 3 different quarterbacks in the span of 4 games earlier on in the season. His best week was week 1 with this team. And, he hasn't been getting the ball. And when he has been getting looks, there have been drops and some poor accuracy from the quarterback position. Maybe this touchdown gets him back on track. I don't know. But it was nice to see him finally find the end zone this season, especially with even just fantasy-wise. Like, it's nice to have a number 1 receiver in your lineup, but at the price he was early on in the year, you couldn't justify that until he started putting up scores. Does this open the floodgates? Hopefully. Especially if you're a Tiger Cats fan, it's nice to see Banks get a touchdown and maybe keep this rolling with the rest of that receiving core. They can do a lot of damage.
It helps that you see Jeremiah Mazzoli just making dynamite plays all over the field. He goes 19 of 26, 258 yards, and the 1 touchdown. But he's over 70% completion percentage. But the biggest change for the Ticats offense over the past 2 weeks is that they actually have a running game. And Don Jackson only had 12 carries, but double-digit carries is not really something we've seen on a regular basis for Ticats running backs. He had 80 yards, just shy of 7 yards a carry. He's looking fresh. He looks like a guy that hasn't been running all season long. And it's probably because he hasn't been. He added 56 yards in the air as well, and he might be the MVP of the Ticats, not for the whole season, but down the stretch here.
The stretch
they look
drive.
like a completely different unit.
Yeah, and if you're going to average 6.7 yards per carry, granted, that average is inflated by a 31-yard run, but
right,
if they can do that and trust him to run the ball and protect it, it opens up their offense because you can slow down pass rushes with a run game, and we saw that on Saturday in one of the other games. So. And, 4 catches, like he said, he's doing it both. Like, you got to respect both aspects of his game. It was one thing Hamilton hasn't done consistently all year is run the football. And they've been, 12 carries isn't crazy, but they have been, not afraid to run the ball, it seems, as much in the last few games. And I don't know if that's just a product of it getting later in the year, or if, maybe Don Jackson finally producing and they're starting to trust him more. I don't know what it is, but it can only make this team better.
Man, that was frustrating. Don Jackson has a big run, and he gets tackled at about the 2 or 3 yard line, and he got a bit banged up on the play, so he had to leave. In comes Sean Thomas Erlington for the touchdown.
the vulture.
Yeah. And to BC's credit, they tried to run the ball. 14 carries to James Butler, 51 yards, and he did have the touchdown. But Lucky Whitehead seemed back to his normal self. Wasn't really that nervous anymore about the hand. He had 9 catches, 98 yards. Burnham was making plays, 7 for 77. But the struggles on the ground made BC pretty one-dimensional at points in the game. So Riley was taking a pounding, and he was standing in there, making the throws, trying to lead his team to the victory, and they only did lose by, the one score at the end of the day, but just not enough to beat the Ticats at home.
Well, and you talk about BC's running game. They got to play Calgary next week. And Calgary's D-line can be lights out. They got to get a running game here in 5 days. They got to figure out how to do it because that's the way their offensive line is played, and it's played better than they did last year. But it can still look really bad at times. It's not going to get the job done at 3.6 yards a carry. It's just not.
Well, and the Stamps coming off the bye, and they've got Reggie Bagleton back in the fold. The Western playoffs are going to be
Calgary
fun.
is going to clinch Friday night, I think is what you're saying.
I think so. BC is sitting at 4-8 on the season now. Calgary is at 500, 6-6. BC is in pretty tough the rest of the season. Let's go to Edmonton. The second half of the Friday Night Football doubleheader, where the Saskatchewan Roughriders just beat the Elks. 19-17 was the final score there. Just pretty much an ugly game. But the Rider offense, well, and I guess we'll give Edmonton credit here. A lot of their starters for all the season were sitting. James Wilder Jr., Darrell Walker, Greg Ellingson, they weren't playing. And the Elks looked like they had intensity. They looked like they had fight. They had effort. They didn't want to be.
They cared.
Yeah. Well, they didn't want to be the team to not win a home game all season long for the first time in Edmonton football history. So they came out with some passion, and I mean, Walter Fletcher had 74 yards rushing. He had 66 yards receiving as well at running back. It's just Saskatchewan just wins these ugly games, and they kind of just play ugly football. And is it time maybe we look at Fajardo as maybe being part of the problems? And I love the guy, and I know a lot of Rider Nation loves the guy, but some of this stuff, it's just not good enough.
That first throw of the football game from Cody Fajardo,
was
terrible. He put it where only the DB could get it.
Yeah, that interception was right at the start of the game, just brutal.
And it almost felt like here we go again. Right? Like, we're going to go into Edmonton late in the year, lose a football game that they need to win. But yeah, you look at it from the Elks' perspective, guys like Walter Fletcher, Daniel Vandervoort, to an extent, Jalen Tolliver, they're playing for next year. They want to solidify a roster spot. Taylor Cornelius, 21 of 35 for 322 and 2 touchdowns. You know, they signed Nick Arbuckle last week to the extension. So, and then Elizondo comes out and says that it's going to be a competition. You can't call it a competition if you're going to pay the guy starter money. You're not going to sit him. So now Cornelius is trying to make a case, and he played way better than I expected him to against this Riders defense. He's making a case,
especially in the fourth quarter.
It would have to be a competition for him to win the job, but trying to get a little bit of a leg up. The guys that haven't been starting all year and we're getting spelled in and stuff, they had to play with the intensity and like they cared, because it matters to them. I don't even think winning was that big of an issue. Yeah, it sucks to be the only team to not win a home game and the first time in Edmonton history. But these guys got to play well, win or lose, if they want jobs next year. And I think you look at somebody like Greg Ellingson and Darrell Walker, they're getting signed somewhere. And they're not giving you what you need in this lineup. So yeah, put the young guys in, and they played great considering the circumstances.
Yeah, the key moment in the first half, I thought, was, basically right at the end of it. 2 minutes left in the second quarter. Saskatchewan gets pretty good field position, have the big play to Duke Williams, and then Braden Lenius has the touchdown. And at the end of the first half, it was 10-3. But Edmonton had the ball for about 11 minutes of the first quarter. And then the third quarter kind of balanced. Saskatchewan was only able to put up 6 points. But the fourth quarter was kind of all Edmonton. And the Saskatchewan secondary at times at the game looked really good. But Taylor Cornelius was just able to turn it on in the fourth quarter. And there was a lot of hands on hips for that Saskatchewan defense. I don't know what it was, but maybe it's, on the road in Calgary, on the road in Montreal, on the road in Edmonton. Pretty tough stretch there. Yeah. And Edmonton almost took advantage of that. And you did mention Danny Vandervoort. Who had him in their fantasy lineup? 2 touchdowns.
I want to say nobody.
Yeah. The first one, was that a caterpillar? Was it a centipede? I don't know.
I said centipede as a joke in the group chat to be disgusting. Because that's my MO, to be completely offside most of the time, but I don't know.
It was a good celly. I'll say that.
It's not as good as Brady Kachuk's, but I'll give him like a 4.5 out of 10.
But the key there is Luchez Purifoy stopping the 2-point conversion. Look at the final score, and that 2-point conversion ends up becoming pretty key. And the 2-point conversion will become a factor again later in the game when Edmonton scores a touchdown to be down by 4. Normally, you're thinking, okay, you kick the extra point, you're down by 3. Now you only need a field goal to send this thing to overtime.
Yeah.
Well, they decided to go for 2. Well, it turned out the Saskatchewan had a pass interference on the play, so they got to retry from the 1. But Elizondo, after that pass interference, changed his mind and wanted to go for the single point. Which you can't do.
What? Some of these coaches are absolute boneheads. We saw it in a Grey Cup, challenging a challenge.
Right.
And getting a penalty. Stuff like that, it boggles my mind how you don't know.
They ended up getting the 2-point conversion, but still.
I mean, if they run the kicker out there and a whole another offensive team, the clock could be running. And if you want to make that, if you want to make those switches to be like, what do you mean we can't kick it? You've only got 20. You've only got the play clock to get your offense back out there.
Yeah,
it's not the ref's issue that you don't know the rules. It's just stuff like that. It's just so stupid. Like somebody even said in the group chat, well, now he's kicking it. I'm like, he can't. He can't. Like, I don't know. I want what he's smoking.
The key here is Edmonton did not turn the ball over. They, if they did, then you'd think Saskatchewan would have really been able to capitalize, but that's kind of been the issue at times for Edmonton during the season, interceptions and things like that. And Saskatchewan got close a couple times, but they weren't able to do it. So these teams are going to play again Saturday in Regina, and it's going to be the start of a very ugly stretch for the Edmonton Elks, who, are just playing for jobs and playing for careers. And it's really unfortunate that these players have to do it 3 times in 7 days, because that's not the way football works. It's not the way it's built.
It's hard enough playing a game once a week.
Yeah. And shout out to Duke Williams for being the receiver.
Like,
that's clearly why Saskatchewan brought him in.
100%. But we're going to be up late in games, and teams are going to try onside kicks. We need to get those. Sign Duke Williams.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't
He's 3 for 3.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Saturday here. Oh, boy. The Toronto Argonauts beating the Ottawa Red Blacks 23-20. I know that the Argos... Okay, what's your question?
How the hell did Ottawa get 20?
Yeah, they should have had more. You're right.
Travis.
I'm sorry.
They almost won another game with under 100 yards passing.
Wow. Well, it's, Devontae Dedmon.
Yeah, that's also fair.
And the poor guy also had about a 95-yard kick return called back due to penalty. They could have, they should have won this game. 2 for 11 they are on the season now. And this game and the way they weren't able to win this game shows exactly why their record is the way it is. McLeod Bethel-Thompson has been anointed the starter in Toronto, and this was not a good game from him, Ty.
No. 28 of 44, 293 yards. I mean, the percentage isn't there. The yardage isn't bad. Then you look, 3 picks and a touchdown. That's not going to get it done. It did because you played Ottawa.
Exactly. It's not going to work.
That doesn't win you a playoff game.
No, it's not going to work against playoff teams.
No.
Well, again, credit to Ottawa. They could have just packed it up and played terribly, but their defense was bringing the pressure. They were fighting for every single thing. They were hitting McLeod Bethel-Thompson. They were forcing him to make bad decisions. They were picking him off, so they were flying all over the field. So credit to them. Also playing for next year and playing for a career in pro football. But, I mean, Lewis Ward just signs the extension. He's got the pro football record for most consecutive field goals. But in this one...
He was going to be, he was their MVP, is what we thought. Like, every team names their own awards. He was going to be the MVP, and it wasn't even going to be close at the start of the year.
Realistically, Ty, who would Ottawa's MVP be?
Oh.
Dedmon. It's Devontae Dedmon.
It's Dedmon, yeah. Other than that, that's the lone bright spot.
Maybe Richie Leone.
And their 2 wins against the Elks.
Speaking of Richie Leone, that guy, he's punting amazing. And last game, the Saskatchewan game, Vedvik, what did he have, that 75-yard punt that went out at the 4?
Yeah, John Ryan can be released. We're good.
There's some good punting going on, and I know Richie Leone has the best net average for punters in the CFL, so I guess he's been a bright spot for the Red Blacks. But Lewis Ward, missing one from 47, 48, 43, leaving all those points on the board. And when you only lose by 3,
Yeah. It's pretty obvious to see what went wrong. Now, at the same time, yeah, you can blame Lewis Ward because he misses those kicks, but you can also blame the offense for stalling out at the 40.
There is so many times, several times in this game, where Dedmon and the defense put the offense in a position to succeed and to finish drives.
Basically had to bail them out.
Yeah. And Duck Hodges goes 8 of 22 for 90 yards. You got that jersey on order yet?
Next question.
You know what? Timothy Flanders looked good, too. 14 carries.
Stupid, sexy Flanders.
95 yards. And we can't really talk much about Red Blacks receivers because 90 yards gained here. But Devontae Dedmon, their need to
leading
get that
receiver
guy.
was R.J. Harris with 27 yards.
Wow. Two catches. Devontae Dedmon, right after the first half, scores that 100-yard return touchdown, and then also had another big one called back, but who knows? Lewis might have missed the field goal on that one. As for Toronto, I mean, do we have another receiver to look out for? Drez Anderson, 4 of 10, 80 yards. Only second to DeVaris Daniels, who had 84 yards receiving in this game. He looked good at times. It looked like an adventure. I would like to see
better than a 4 for 10 catch ratio.
He should have had an even bigger game at receiver there. But I think as we wrap up the season here, it's going to be interesting to watch who's going to be able to wrap up the season at running back for the Argos, because John White ended up having to leave the game with a knee injury, and you just feel for the guy. He battled through 2-3 season-ending injuries while he was in Edmonton, and he's been healthy the last little while. And had to leave the game here, and it just didn't look good there. He only had 7 carries, and man, I hope it's not as serious as it looked. But A.J. Ouellette comes in, runs hard, 14 carries, 107 yards. DJ Foster missed the game. Ty did not get the memo. Foster was in his fantasy lineup.
My fantasy lineup is like a Ronco rotisserie.
Hey, I had that kind of week last week too. So.
You set it and forget it.
Yeah. that was a rough one for you, but I just want to look at it big picture for Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're undefeated at home, but there's a showdown for first place at BMO Field this weekend with Hamilton coming to town. They have to figure out a lot in just a few days before the Ticats show up, because if they play like this, it's going to be ugly.
It'd be over at halftime.
I don't know what it was, but since Arbuckle got traded, McLeod Bethel Thompson, I mean, maybe he plays better under pressure with somebody over his shoulder. I'm not sure. Yeah,
I hope that's not the case, because then you're never gonna get the reins, right? Yeah. If that's the only way you can play, the minute you start making mistakes, you're pulled anyway. You're not going to be able to work through them. He's getting to work through them now, and I don't know. Yeah, he's a starter, but I don't know if he is a starter.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to critique wins, and yeah, they went and got the win, and this was kind of like that game for Saskatchewan in Edmonton, where playing a team at the bottom of the division, and yeah, they got the win. It was probably a lot uglier than it had to be, or it should have been, but Toronto had some veterans getting back into the lineup on the offensive line, and those guys are getting used to playing next to each other again, I guess. I mean, you see what Ottawa did, and changing the O-line combination every single week, it just doesn't bode well. And it's really been a struggle for Toronto over the last few weeks here. Dexter McCoyle had to hit the 6-game injured list. Peter Nicastro has been starting at center for most of the season. Last week, on about Wednesday, they're saying, he'll be good to go this weekend. Well, guess what? He's on the 6-game injured list. Yeah. So
the injuries are coming at a terrible time if you're an Argos fan.
Absolutely, and they're going to affect them, I think, going into the playoffs here. They're kind of limping into those playoffs a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not exactly the ideal situation. You want to be hitting playoffs, playing your best football and kind of getting in that groove. If you're kind of running out, like every team at this point in the season is banged up. You're going to be running out new lineups, maybe not to this extent that we've seen for some teams, but like a backup here or one wide receiver, maybe not quite the overhaul that you see on the Red Blacks offensive line every week, or what's went on in Toronto the last couple weeks. And that just makes it tough coming down the stretch. The one saving grace is that they have clinched a playoff spot, but if they want that to be a home playoff spot, they got to get healthy and they got to play a lot better than they did this week.
Yeah, and they only have a few days to figure that out. So.
Yeah, and Hamilton's starting to hit stride, and it's a terrible time for the Argos to be playing Hamilton.
Don't often say that about a team sitting in first place in their division, but that's where we are.
Well, as an Oiler fan, I've had to say that a lot.
Yeah. The last game of Week 14, which, by the way, Ty, this is normally the final weekend of the CFL regular season. And I've been to games in Regina where it is full-blown blizzard and about minus 15. Winnipeg kickoff conditions, 12 degrees on the first weekend in November. I don't think you could ask for better football weather in Winnipeg. Nope. I don't think the West Final will be that nice, though.
Oh, God, no.
The Mother Nature is looking out for the Canadian Football League so far. Well, fingers crossed for the rest of the season. I want
every game from here on out to be minus 20 and a foot of snow.
There might be more than a couple of those this year, man.
And I am here for it.
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers beat the Montreal Alouettes 31-21. Again, the difference, the fourth quarter. The Bombers and the Owls each got a touchdown in the first, second, and third quarters of this game. Montreal getting shut out in the fourth, but Trevor Harris getting his first start as a Montreal Alouette. Well, I know we threw the 2 picks, but man, it was a lot more successful than his last start against Winnipeg while he was in Edmonton.
Yeah, that's pretty safe to say. 56% though, that's not very pretty. The 2 picks, like you said, yeah, he did offset those with 2 touchdowns, only 177 yards. Still, to put up 21 points on this Winnipeg team is nothing to shake a stick at. So, you can take positives away. It sucks to try to moral victories don't count, right? But coming into a back-to-back next week now, week 15, going up against Winnipeg again, you're not going in like you lost a game 31-0. Like you stuck with this team until the fourth quarter, and now you get to play at home, make a couple adjustments, and you might be able to double their points allowed, in the fourth quarter this week. Maybe you can get 6, right? But I mean, it's just one of those things. Yeah, it didn't look pretty, but I mean, they stuck with them. But again, that fourth quarter, Winnipeg just they bring in the closer. I don't know what it is. Enter Sandman comes over the loudspeaker, and it's lights out.
Man, and we were talking about this before we hit record here. Montreal showed that I think the way to beat Winnipeg is to run the ball. And not every...
Which sounds counterintuitive.
It kind of does with Winnipeg's defensive line and their linebackers and things like that. But... And not every CFL team is blessed to have a William Stanback there. They just aren't. So he had 106 yards on 16 carries. He's getting over 6 yards a carry. He was getting chunks at a time, and that was big for Montreal to keep up with him. And they talked about it at halftime. I think they had to use Stanback even a little more because slowing down the pass rush, and you saw how fast Jefferson and Jeffcoat were getting off the ball because Harris was with his new offense. They were just going on one. And as soon as the ball moved half a millimeter, they were on top of him. I got to give credit to the offensive tackles in Montreal because
that is not a matchup you want with a brand new quarterback in your system.
Could have been absolutely destroyed here, and he really he made it out of the game. Obviously, he got hit a few times, but it could have been really ugly, and they kind of they were able to take care of it a little bit there, which was kind of impressive.
Well, yeah, if you can run the ball, I don't even know if you necessarily need to be super productive, but you have to be willing to keep at it because they can't just – if you're going to let the front four pin their ears back because you're passing on 90% of your plays, it's not going to work against this team. Jackson, Jeffcoat, and Willie Jefferson are going to get there. And if they're not, one of them is going to be doubled. It's going to open up matchup inequalities somewhere else if they're going to blitz or somewhere else on that defensive line. And your quarterback's going to be hung out to dry. 6.6 average is great. 16 carries. I mean, if you can, maybe if they give him the ball 25 times, maybe it works. Maybe they come away with the win. I don't know, but it's when you have those two guys on the edges, you can do all you want. Bringing in a guy to chip, double teaming, everything else like that. But if you can commit to running the ball, they can't just come at you. And we saw that they would use it to some pretty good success in this game, and especially in the first 3 quarters.
I had to laugh late in the game when Tony Washington took a procedure penalty and Willie Jefferson was in his face. And Tony just laughed it off. I'm like, I can't blame him. I'd be taking a procedure every single play.
Oh, my God. I'd be pulling an Xavier Fulton more than likely. Just
Like
stand there. Oh, you went around me again.
When you're that fast that you look offside every play, it's
right.
It's impressive.
He might be offside on half of the plays, but the refs can't catch it because it's just too fast.
Yeah. Jake Winicky, touchdown Jake is back. He had 4 catches on 4 targets for 60 yards. Even Quan Bray had 62 yards receiving. He was Montreal's leading receiver. Winston Rose, first game back in Winnipeg. It was his first game, and looked like he was on Eugene Lewis for most of the game. And Lewis had 3 catches, 44 yards. So Rose, I'd say, held his own in this one. As for Winnipeg, I mean, Drew Wolotarski has a touchdown. Nick Dembski is just all over the place. He has a receiving touchdown. He was running the ball as well. Kenny Lawler has a 100-yard game, 7 catches, 111 yards. I want to ask you about Winnipeg's defense or offense. I kind of wonder if we're going to see the carry share between Johnny Augustine and Brady Oliveira kind of reverse over the next few weeks if they don't get Harris back in there before the playoffs.
Yeah. They're going to need this team. I mean, we always thought they were built around Andrew Harris and running the football. Harris goes out this year, and all of a sudden Zach Collaros is MOP candidate, being able to throw the ball all over the field. But that's because Oliveira and Augustine have been able to carry that weight. Right, and if they got to platoon them out of the backfield and get them the carries, get them. I don't know if they are going to carry the ball as much as Andrew Harris did. That's a lot to ask, but if they can get 75 to 80% of the carries and yardage that Andrew Harris was getting when he was healthy, I mean, this offense should be fine.
Well, it kind of looked like, and they were doing it. They were just rotating every series. Augustine will get this one, Oliveira will get the next one, and
when you do that, it's nice. I'd rather them do that than pull a guy in a series, and then so let's say they pull Oliveira and bring in Augustine because of a play call, right?
Yeah,
you see that in the NFL where they have the back that's the receiving back, and you see it in the CFL too, but more of it in the NFL where they have a receiving back and the back that runs more. And so when a guy comes in, I mean, it's pretty obvious they're going to run a screen or something like that. At least this keeps the defense on their toes a little more.
2 interceptions for the Bombers in the fourth quarter. One from Adam Bighill, one from DeAndre Alford. Man, he might be the most outstanding rookie this season. He's probably going to be, and he might be Winnipeg's nominee, absolutely, and maybe the entire CFL. Like, the way he's been able to fit into the defense has been impressive. So the Bombers put up 10 points in the fourth quarter, and down go the Montreal Alouettes, who are sitting at 6-6. Third in the East Division, Ticats 7-5, Toronto 8-4. And if you look at the West, it's Winnipeg 11-1. Saskatchewan 8-4, and Calgary 6-6.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Well, I guess just one. At the start of the year, I believe I said that there would not be a crossover.
And there's not going to be one.
Thank you.
Whenever there is one little prediction that you were going to get right, you got to throw it out there. So well done, buddy.
Thank you. That's what I'm here for.
Well, now I got to wonder, how's Winnipeg going to manage this roster? They're going to Montreal, and then they're going to Calgary to end their season.
Mm-hmm.
Who are they going to play? I mean,
I think you let I think you have to have the players in on it and see who needs.
I bet you
what
they want to play
like,
those vets.
I think I would rather rest them in this back-to-back against Montreal and have them play in Calgary to minimize the time off.
And either way, they still got the bye built in for the playoffs, so yeah.
Right, that's what I mean, right? So you have that bye in the playoff. I would rather have them playing like a normal schedule where you would have a bye week and it's only 1 week, right? Instead of them playing, a majority of the vets playing in Montreal this upcoming week, and then not playing in Calgary, and then you have the buys and all. It's just, I would rather keep it more of a traditional schedule setup.
I had a 76-point week in fantasy. I think that gave me a win in the Canadian Football Podcast Network Fantasy Challenge, but McLeod Bethel-Thompson as my quarterback didn't help me.
Nope.
Tavares Daniels was my leading scorer, 19.4 points.
Do I have to pull mine up?
You don't have to do that, man. I won't make you do it. First, before we get to the numbers, we are a part of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. You can check out all the great shows at albertapodcastnetwork.com. I was actually just scrolling through, and I came across my Viewfinder podcast with photographer David Yun. Check that out, albertapodcastnetwork.com. Turns out that photography is not just, sticking your camera and pressing a button. There's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it.
Learn that's literally the definition. It's just
learn about the thought process that photographers use with the My Viewfinder podcast, a part of the Alberta Podcast Network.
Before we get to the fantasy numbers, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
So, this is wild. We call Jake Wieneke Touchdown Jake.
Yeah.
How many does he have?
On the season? I haven't looked. I don't have this in front of me. Is it 8?
Exact perfect. I don't want you to look. I want you to...
Okay, is it 8?
It's 9. Eugene Lewis is second with 7. They have the 1-2
right
when it comes to receiving touchdowns. Who leads the CFL in rushing touchdowns?
Well, I know it's Sean McGuire, isn't it?
Yeah, with 8.
So it's touchdown Sean.
Yeah. And then Kadeem Carey has 6.
Wow.
Cody Fajardo in third, or tied for third with Sean Thomas Arlington and Michael Riley. And Stanback has 3.
And Sean McGuire with his...
he might steal
half a yard.
This is like McDavid playing with Draisaitl, where who do you pick for the heart?
Yeah.
Who's your MOP candidate from Winnipeg?
Ty throwing Sean McGuire out there.
Is it still Collaros? I'm kidding. It's still Collaros, but I find that hilarious that he's got 8 rushing touchdowns and leads the league just vulturing scores.
I thought it was maybe a rough week when it came to fantasy output.
Wasn't a lot of ridiculously high scores.
No, there wasn't.
No, Taylor Cornelius led the way for quarterbacks at 22.3, Michael Riley at 20.6, and the aforementioned Zach Collaros. Yeah, the aforementioned Zach Collaros at 19.2, Sean McGuire 7.2. He outdueled Devlin Hodges, who only had 6.1. So that's a pretty good week. Nat. I thought BC didn't run the ball, but James Butler ended up with 21 points to lead the way for running backs, followed up by Walter Fletcher and Don Jackson. So the 2 teams that don't run the ball took first and second on the week. I mean, granted, they were helped out by some receptions from the running backs. Brandon Banks led the way for wide receivers at 22.1, Vandervoort with 20.4, Lucky 19.6, Tavares Daniels 19.4, and rounding out top 5, Dominique Rhymes at 18.8.
Wow. Vandervoort up there. That's pretty funny. The 2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns.
Kid.
Yeah. Jake Wieneke was an 8. With that touchdown got him to 16.
All right, there it is. Week 14 of the CFL season. We'll be back on Thursday to tee up the second last week of the regular season. It's Travis Currah, Brazilian Ty, the 2 and Out podcast. You can rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcatcher Talk to you in a few days.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.